Vice Chancellor, distinguished guests. Over the years, it has been my great honour to take part in some notable events at Queen's University in Belfast, some of which had a deeply personal significance to me. I'm thinking first of all about that day in 2008 when you graciously brought me into the Queen's family with the award of an honorary doctorate. Then again there was the occasion in 2019 when you appointed me an honorary professor in peace studies. Both of those moments and your generosity will live long in my memory. But all of the events in which it has been my privilege to take part, perhaps none has been as historically important as the one which took place in the spring of this year. Agreement 25 was the international conference organised and hosted by Queen's to mark the quarter century since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. It was an occasion to look back at what had been achieved and to consider how Northern Ireland might stay in the path towards continued peace and prosperity. Many of us who were involved in the events leading up to the moment in 1998 were there. George Mitchell and Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, and it is a long list, but practically everyone was there. But there's one person who was involved in the peace process from the very beginning, an individual whose work laid the foundations for that historic agreement of 1998. Our honorary graduate this evening, Sir John Major. So, what do I say about this man whom I've known and admired for many, many years? His parliamentary career began in 1979 when he was elected MP for Huntingdon. And this was the beginning of the Margaret Thatcher era. Under his premiership, under her premiership, he at first had several junior posts, but his rise through the ranks was swift. He became Treasury Secretary in 1987, Foreign Secretary in 1989, and Chancellor of the Exchequer later in 1989 and into 1990. Following Mrs. Thatcher's resignation of that year, he became leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister. Then became the general election in 1997, which resulted in a Labour government and the premiership of Tony Blair. He gave up his parliamentary seat in 2001 and was knighted in 2005. That's the chronology, a brief CV, but there's much more to what Sir John's story, and much more that we should recognise, particularly when it comes to Northern Ireland. And I know that list is long, long outside of Northern Ireland with so many huge achievements, but if I can just keep it to that for this evening. As Prime Minister, he made his pursuit of peace priority, and we can truly be called one of the founders of the peace process. He's a man who gets on with people, and also his first objective, when he achieved, was to improve relations between the British and Irish government, which haven't been too good since 1921. With the establishment of a new mood, he encouraged a period of intense negotiations, which eventually led to the first truly important step forward, the Downing Street Declaration. And that contained the principle of consent, that the future of Northern Ireland would be decided by its people. It was signed on the 15th of December by Sir John and Albert Reynolds, who was then Taoiseach, and was the foundation on which the peace process was built. Perhaps it's forgotten now, but that particular period, from this time of the year, the end of the October, which in Ireland is the Halloween period, was a terrible period. In 1 week, just at that turnover of October into November, 23 people were killed in some of the horrific events, in the bomb in the Shankill, in the what became known as the trick or treat, and the terrible attack in a bar where multiple people were killed. And the atmosphere was horrendous, there was no doubt in that. But in a 6-week period of intensive work by Sir John and Albert Reynolds, they brought the Downing Street Declaration to fruition, which then led on to much of the work that we all were able to follow. And John remains passionate about the future of Northern Ireland, and indeed about a great many other things. Not for him has been a quiet retirement with the cricket matches or reading some of his favourite novels, although I'm sure he manages to make time for both. Though talking to him this evening before we came into the room, I gather there's not much time, but still a huge and busy schedule of work. He's still an important and influential voice in the issues of the day, delivering measured, thoughtful opinions formed on a bedrock of experience and a clear-headed sense of what is best for the greater good. His old adversary and now his admirer, Tony Blair, in a recent context said, "Thank God for John Major. How times can change." Let me echo that sentence very sincerely. Would our honorary graduate please rise? Vice Chancellor of the University, with the authority of the Senate, I ask you to confer on John Major the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa.
In the name of the University, I confer on you the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa. Thank you. Sir John to address the Assembly.
Well, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here this evening and both touched and flattered by the honour you've so generously bestowed on me tonight. It is and a special pleasure to have Bertie Ahern here this evening. It's typical Irish understatement what he had to say about me. I'm extremely grateful. I'm not sure how much I believe, but I know how much my mother would have believed. It's also somewhere, I hear, is my old and good friend Chris Patton, and I look forward to seeing him later on this evening. If I may, I'd like to reflect, in view of what you've said, a little on the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement is 25 years old now, but the full dividends of peace are still a work in progress. From the moment I first became Prime Minister, it seemed to me to be obvious that no one was going to win the conflict that we've come to know as the Troubles. The British government wouldn't, indeed couldn't, give in to violence. Nor could they change the status of Northern Ireland without the specific wish of the people of Northern Ireland. And the IRA would not, and probably could not, give up their struggle for United Ireland. So that left only one way through. Only a political agreement would bring violence to an end. But any such agreement would have to embrace the wholly different ambitions of the Unionist and the nationalist communities. Both sides needed help to secure agreement. And they received it from the churches, from a wide swathe of public opinion, and from brave individuals who'd been arguing for peace over many years. But the essential prerequisite to any settlement seemed to me to be a close partnership between Westminster and Dublin, and once Albert Reynolds became Taoiseach, that soon came to be. Throughout the 1990s, the search for peace was a construct of many hands. The governments of Albert Reynolds and John Bruton, of Bertie Ahern and Tony Blair, of the leaders of the Northern Ireland political parties, the church, peace movements, and individuals. There were many people. No one can claim authorship of peace. It was the result of the work of very many people. And that includes the paramilitary leaders, who, when they recognized that armed conflict would never achieve their aims, took a very great political risk of their own to seek an end to the Troubles. Now, all of these very different component parts, aided by war weariness after 30 years of fruitless violence, helped forge the search for agreement. The whole effort was spurred on by the obvious wish of Irish men and women, north and south, to work together to end violence. and at key moments the powerful influence of the United States helped to persuade the unpersuadable that peace must inevitably come. It was clear that nobody wished to see the lives of yet another generation marred by the Troubles. Yet the road to peace was troubled and lengthy. After advances came setbacks. After agreements came doubts. After hopes came disappointments, and sometimes bombs as well. Impossible demands were commonplace. Recriminations were routine. Decades-long suspicions made progress frustratingly slow. History threw a long shadow. For both Unionists and Nationalists, the fear of failure or of betrayal was always there throughout the whole of the peace process. But eventually, in a triumph of common sense, the Good Friday Agreement ushered in a new start. And after that new start, the British-Irish relationship moved to a higher and much more cooperative level than at any time in our long joint history. The Troubles, as we look back on them, were a time of suspicion, of mistrust, of resentment, of antagonism between communities and political parties. For 30 years, Northern Ireland was blighted by a recurring terror, which at one time seemed insoluble. But after the Good Friday Agreement, a new, different, and better life beckoned. No longer were the daily news bulletins of exploded bombs, of destruction of lives and property, of police, soldiers, and civilians killed, of punishment beatings and other atrocities. The implementation of the agreement swept away the old security border between North and South, and not a soul missed it. It may now be best remembered as a hated symbol of the Troubles, with its checkpoints, its listening posts, its watchtowers, its soldiers, and its concrete and barbed wire. Now, all are gone, and it is as it should be. And now, hopefully, that is how it will remain. Although we would be foolish to forget the past, we would be very wise to focus upon the future. The United Kingdom and the Republic are one another's nearest neighbours, and our relationship should be one of mutual consideration and harmony. And if it is not, then it is a failure of politics. In our complex world, we cannot afford failure. For there are challenges aplenty for our two islands and for the wider world. This is not a clement and easy moment for governments or citizens in countries almost wherever you look. What are we to do about Russia and China? What about the war in Ukraine? Or the war, for that matter, in Gaza with Israel? Can we reach an international agreement on how to cope with worldwide migrancy? For it is a worldwide problem. How can we return to worthwhile and continuing economic growth? And why is democracy declining and civil liberties falling in so many countries around the world? All these are fundamental political problems which no government properly dare ignore. But as a counterbalance, we shouldn't forget achievements that once seemed impossible. Many diseases that once killed or crippled are now curable. Some, such as smallpox, have to all extent been eradicated. As science advances, cancers and dementia is in retreat, and hopefully soon Parkinson's will be in retreat as well. Literacy is at an all-time high. 9 out of every 10 people in the world now have access to clean water. Lifespan has increased right across the developed world. So we should never underestimate what can be done with the right policies and the right people with the right intentions. All this and so much more has been achieved, improving the quality of life. And that is true in Ireland as well. 25 years on, life is immeasurably better than it was during the Troubles. No longer is death and destruction, misery and heartbreak a regular feature of our daily lives. Relations between North and South have been transformed, although more can, and I hope will, still be done. At some time, the British and Irish governments may wish to review the provisions of the Good Friday Agreement and perhaps make some tweaks, but not, I think, very many. The act has stood up well over a long infancy. But in the decade after the agreement, the potential for economic growth was proven until the financial crisis of 2008 began to erect new barriers to greater prosperity, as a little later did COVID, Brexit, and the war in Ukraine. But I see no reason why high growth can't return, with Northern Ireland focused on a prosperous future rather than its quarrelsome past. The economic success of the Republic must surely be an incentive to the North. One precondition will help growth and stability, and that is a very important precondition. It's the return to Stormont of the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly. It is their responsibility to be there, and I hope they soon will be. And once achieved, this must be accompanied by the confidence that Stormont will continue to govern with no future absences, and that cross-border cooperation will flourish as originally hoped, and not limp along in the limited fashion it has been doing over the last few years. Now, all past experience tells us that both domestic and international investors are far more likely to entrust their money to Northern Ireland, or indeed the South, when they see in place a credible administration working hard for the well-being of its populace. And there are many reasons to invest in Northern Ireland, quite apart from its spectacular scenery. Belfast is ranked only behind London as a UK tech city, and has a fine growing reputation in green energy projects. There's a wonderfully successful services sector, high growth opportunities in cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, life and health sciences, and the creative industries. There is no shortage of opportunity, and that is ample scope to revolutionize agriculture, so important there, and water treatment, to recycle waste, as well as to protect the natural environment. All of these sectors are ripe for growth, alongside the traditional industries of aerospace, defence, manufacturing and engineering. All, I believe, can play a vital role in the future success of Northern Ireland. But for that to take place, we need political stability and, as I said a moment ago, a working government in the North. Vice-Chancellor, I shall always look back on this evening with some affection. I rarely wear pink from top to bottom. It is a night not to be forgotten for that reason, amongst many others. And I have a profound sense of pleasure at what Northern Ireland has achieved over these past 25 years. But more important than what has been achieved is to look forward. To look forward to lives built on cooperation, not conflict, and towards a future full of hope and promise. And that, ladies and gentlemen, for all the people of Ireland, both North and South, is my most fervent wish of all. Thank you very much.